Hello, BookTube. I'm here to talk about a book called Once Upon a Tome. It's been going the rounds, I guess, a little bit. This was gifted to me, a birthday gift, by Amy at Amy's Dusty Bookshelf. She had read it. She has the North American copy, or the American edition, which is a naked hardcover pictorial, and this one has a dust jacket. I'm assuming that's supposed to be the author, but he should have a mohawk. um, it was published in 2022, and it's basically about a young man who applies for a job. He's 22 at an antiquarian bookshop in London, and it's a bookshop that's been around since the 1760-ish, I think, or something like that. I've forgotten the exact date. It doesn't really matter, but it was around for a long 1761. Yeah, started in New York and then was transplanted to the UK, to London, and he became an apprentice bookseller. Took him a couple years, but then he was then he became a full fledged bookseller. And along the way, he got a, or at least he took some courses. It doesn't say he got the degree. At least I didn't notice that, but he took a course, the history of the book, which sounds quite interesting. And it's sort of his experiences, coming in as a neophyte and not really someone who knew much about books, and learning about books, the odd characters of his colleagues, as well as the history to a certain extent of the business, and customers, and the usual requisite, strangeness of book collectors and people who frequent bookshops. And he's got a number of names for people, like he called them cryptid or things like that. That are Dracula. Dracula is someone who is very specific on what they want to collect. Um, and yeah, and he's a bit flippant at times of things. And according to the uh, back flap, he's 28 now, so he's spent 6 years at the most. As a bookseller, so not very long at all. Um, and his age does show through. Um, there's things in there that I just sort of I do shake my head at, but that's me being a curmudgeon. And it's you couldn't get away from the stuff about gender, and health and safety nonsense and things like that. There was a time where people just got on with things, and they didn't need to be protected as much, and wrapped in cotton wool now. And there's also the thing about books that are sensitive and sensitive subjects. So I knew that was coming somewhere because it has to be in there and being published today. Where these kind of things were always around in bookshops, and it was dealt with, but it didn't. The people didn't say, "Oh, look what I'm doing! Look what I'm doing here! I'm protecting." None of this virtual signaling BS. Because it was done, and it was just done, and it was but anyway, that's a whole another topic. um and as I say, he's like, if he was an employee of mine in the bookshop, I would have fired him. And I would have fired several of the other employees too. There's certain things that some booksellers do that I disagree with completely. And, I have some experience in this because I did have a bookshop and I've spent a long time with books, not specifically antiquarian books or anything like that. I'm not an expert in that, but just in the general things. And the one thing that, and it's supposed to, like, it's a rare, I have to admit, I'd never heard of this shop before. It was called, it's Southern Limited on Sackville Street, established 1761 in London. I'd never heard of them before, which I should have. There's something that it's a very personal thing to me. This book, in many ways, because it's current. In the sense of the time, like I came in 2005 to the UK, so he was just a baby at that point, pretty well, or very young. And I tried to get jobs in a bookshop, and for various reasons, I was 40, and for various reasons, well, that was 2006. I would have been 40, and for various reasons, like I was too old, didn't have UK work experience in bookshops. They wanted a female, and it was always when I found out who was taken as that I lost out to. It was either a young woman or a young man, and usually of different persuasion. It was even asked of me, like, what my sexual orientation is. Well, that was the one thing that I found really weird here in the UK was when you fill out an application, there's a thing of saying, your sexual orientation, all this kind of stuff, religion. And it says, oh, you don't have to fill this out. So I didn't fill this out for most of the places, and I didn't hear anything. And when I actually asked help at a job center here, to the counselors there, and they said I should fill it out because a lot of places will throw it aside if it's not filled out. So I reapplied to all these places, so dozens of places. Then I got actually replies back that they've received it. I didn't even get that before. So yeah, I would have had to, I couldn't pretend I was a woman, but I suppose I could have pretended a different persuasion, sexual orientation, and it might have helped. So it irks me a little bit when I see people like this that get a job because I personally done that. It's nothing against the guy, Oliver Darkshire, that wrote this. It's fabulous that young people are getting into book selling, but it just a personal thing that sort of I had some. I had a stake in it at the time, and it was very difficult to come to terms in some ways that I'm not going to be able to do it because nobody wants to hire me, because they clearly didn't want somebody with some experience. I couldn't get a job like that. They preferred to have someone who didn't know anything, and I suppose maybe so they don't, they have to unlearn someone habits. But the thing is, you're learning something. You're learning on the job, and you learn how to do it the way they do it. Everybody will do things different. So but anyway, it's enough of that. But yeah, and the other thing is too, it's an antiquarian store. It says of a rare bookseller. I kind of wonder if people who read this, a lot of people don't really understand what a rare book is. It's an interesting term. It's an old book is not necessarily a rare book, and a rare book is not necessarily a valuable book. Or wanted, or sought after. I've got some rare books here that were only probably 10 printed, maybe 5 or 6 exist now. That's rare, however you put it. But it's not. They're not sought after, and this is where a lot of this thing, the rare book trade is a sort of a manufactured beast. Because if a bookseller has some clout, a rare bookseller, they can find stuff like that I'm talking about here, and they can then work it in and sort of twist people's arms to a certain extent, and uh, tell them the virtues of how this is unique and it's collectible, and that's how, to a large extent, the rare book trade started and why it's that way. But obviously there are instances where there are important books because their association with things, or for instance, like I remember reading a an auction. It was a second edition, I think it was, of Darwin's Origin of Species. But because most people say, "Oh, well, it's not really worth that much." Hey, but this was Darwin's copy with extra marginalia in it and corrections and things like that, and added things that he was doing. So that is an important copy. So that is a very rare, a rare book in of itself. It's not a first, so therefore, and then you get these modern firsts and stuff like that, where again a lot of this stuff is manufactured. Some of it holds the test of time, but yeah, it's interesting. He didn't really get into that too much in here. So I found it a little strange, and but it looks like it would be an interesting shop to go to, because I'm kind of surprised. Like, I'm not surprised, but I'm still surprised in some ways that they've got stuff in there. Like they had sellers with books in that the current owners haven't even seen, and they find it, and it's been sitting there for 50 years, molding books. And it's like he's talking about this, searching for it, but it's just it's unbelievable. Or even within the shop, a desk gets buried and they don't even know the desk is there because it's been there for like 20 or 30 years, and it's covered with books or photo albums, all sorts of stuff like that. And there is something neat about places like that, because as he says, there's books on the shelves that could have been there for 50, 60 years that have never sold. That is something that is unique about a bookshop, and it makes it interesting to see, because a lot of stuff disappears very quickly, and some booksellers will have a quick turnover. But an antiquarian bookseller, if it's been around for a long time, it's neat when it's this way. But not the sellers in places, because you just kind of wonder, like, this place, I don't know when they relocate. It doesn't really go into that history. It seems like the current location was the 1930s. But so there could be still sellers out there somewhere in London with books in, or other booksellers or places that are just still sitting there. It boggles the mind. You think that by now it wouldn't, but you never know. If this is like 2018, 2019, that they discovered another cellar that looked like nobody had been into for decades and decades. But he there was nothing in it. There were no books in that one. But yeah, and the bric-a-brac that they sort of had at times, like busts, and there was a gourd, that was carved in the likeness of Queen Victoria. And in the picture here, they've got a pumpkin. Gourd is not a pumpkin. So whoever did the artwork didn't quite know the remit, I don't think. But anyway, it was a fun book. It was a fun book. I still say that all the older stuff I like it better. The sensibilities in it are better for me. Um, but again, thank you, Amy, for sending this. It was a joy to read. And I could have actually really did this as Will Sean Like It because it was published in 2022. But a book about a bookseller, antiquarian bookseller, rare bookseller, is there a chance that I will hate it? Probably not. I may not love it, but it's doubtful that I would hate something like this. So I decided not to do it for that because it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Whether I'd like it or not, and I did. So anyway, that's it. On to the next book. Thank you, BookTube.